Team Rocket, the worst Pokemon thieves, but the best fashionistas, the best cross-dressers, and the best costume designers. Let's rank Team Rocket's 10 greatest disguises of all time. Hey everyone, it's Charles. How are you today? Today, we will be ranking the top 10 Team Rocket disguises of all time based on impact, effectiveness, and apparently incel mentality. Any hoot hoots, drop me a comment about your favorite Team Rocket disguise. Kindly give that like button a little poot poot on the boot boot or the YouTube algorithm, and let's jump right in. James looking poofy with poofy hair and a goatee stolen from your haggard local bar owner. Jessie looking just perfect with straight bangs and her hair down. And Meowth looking like a Pan's Labyrinth fawn with severed Goodra ears strapped to his head. Thanks to these hairstyle variants, the trio actually looked more disguised than usual, and Jessie in particular is an extra degree of separation from her usual self thanks to the lack of her signature lipstick. What I especially love about these costumes is that they don't use them to pull off the typical episode-breaking Rocket interruption, but instead toiled away in the kitchen and were commended for their good cooking. A Team Rocket disguise that actually leads to them achieving something worthwhile, well, that is a Team Rocket disguise for the ages. Ash was still a pants-crapping loser back in Kanto, but Team Rocket had already peaked. Not in terms of actually achieving anything worthwhile at their jobs, but at unleashing some slick costumes that dazzled viewers and tricked simple-minded commenters like Ash Ketchum. And episode 60, Misty Mermaid, delivered one of the most memorable costume sets of the anime. These disguises weren't going to pull the wool over the average person's eyes. I mean, that's obviously James, but even if the costumes couldn't fool a Fennekin, they did make an impact on fans that would linger on for decades. Jessie was appropriately dressed like a domineering circus master overseeing her circus animals. Meowth looked cute, I guess. And James emerged as a man confident enough to wear whatever the hell he wanted while filling out his tutu in all the right places to the delight of spectators. Team Rocket stole the show in Cerulean City that day, and the tutu would come back for round 2-2 in Flower Power of the Johto Saga, joining a select list of recurring Rocket costumes. When it comes to Team Rocket getups, Jessie and James tend to steal the show, even if they never steal any Pokemon, but that is not to say that Meowth has not had his own fair share of great moments. In particular, his Pokemon impersonations have always been really fun. Sunflora, Sneasel, Aipom, Murkrow, Spinda, Kirlia, Wailord, Shiftry, Weavile, Banette, Duat, Golem, you get the idea. He is dressed up as a lot of Pokemon. But I must say that my favorite of all Meowth Pokemon impersonations has to be Meowth Umbreon. Jessie painted Meowth to look like Umbreon in the 4th episode of Black and White in order to distract Don George and his crew away from their Battle Club warehouses, so that she and James could head in for a goofer of a heist. But more importantly, I basically just think that the costume looks cool. Like, if Spider-Man Meowth encountered the Venom symbiote and wasn't cringe, or if Meowth had an epic megaform, or if Galarian Meowth was not Galarian Meowth. Anyways, I just wanted to show some love for our favorite man-cat, and this costume was certainly a good one. Episode 100 of the Pokemon anime told the love story of two Nidoran, and the attempt of Team Rocket to steal those two Nidoran for some reason. Regardless of how you interpret certain aspects of Jessie and James' characters, there were certainly hints dropped here and there that suggested they could make quite the couple if they did choose to link up. And the Newlyweds costume was a fun spin on the idea that was eaten right up by Rocket shippers. James looked gorgeous in a flowing white dress. Jessie looked handsome in a long navy tux, and the costumes were actually pretty effective at a glance, since Jessie's face was covered up by her hairstyle and James's face was nestled mysteriously beneath his veil. It's Too bad that they immediately gave up the ruse by snatching those little Nidorans and escaping in a hot air balloon that exploded out of a giant wedding cake. But for those of you who wanted to see what the actual consummation of rocket shipping would look like, be sure to check out the Electric Tale of Pikachu manga, in which Jessie and James actually do end up becoming newlyweds and, well, doing those things that newlyweds do. I have to say, this is another one of those disguises that actually does conceal Jessie and James's identities quite well. Not only are there easily distinguishable hair colors that usually give them away hidden by voluminous brown wigs, but they even darkened their skin to take the costumes to the next level. In fact, apart from their voices, Jessie's earrings are about the only thing that even hint at their true identities. And while this was a one-off costume for your typical botched rocket heist, the cherry on the cake that catapults this into the top 10 was that James exploited his disguise to pull off one of the most dank troll moves in the history of the anime, stealing Ash's first kiss. What a joker. Now would someone please ring into the local police box and get this man off the streets? As the OG James cross-dressing disguise, this was quite the disguise indeed. But setting aside James's first demonstration of how far he could bend the barbell of conventional masculinity, the super tanned schoolgirls with blonde hair and white lipstick shtick must have felt a little bit out there to just about anyone watching the episode outside of Japan. In part because school uniforms are somewhat of a rarity in places like the Americas, but more so because of the eclectic makeup and hair. And this is because it is a nod to the GANGURO trend that was peaking in Japan at the time, but non-existent in other countries. Essentially, Japan's GANGURO subculture of the 90s emerged as a counterculture in which groups of young women defied the Japanese female beauty standard of fair skin, black hair, and subtle makeup by tanning super dark, dyeing their hair bleach blonde, orange, or other unnatural colors, and applying thick, vibrant makeup in unconventional ways. The word ganguro itself is a contraction of the phrase gangankuro, which you could translate to something like aggressively dark, and the trend is said to have been inspired by certain demons of Japanese folklore, which certainly makes sense given demons' obvious twisting of beauty standards, as well as the Ganguro spin-off Yamamba trend's obvious connection to the mountain witch yokai of the same name. Of course, like any good trend, all the rebels out there stopped caring about it within a few years when they realized they actually needed to get jobs, or they simply started whitening their skin to get cool with the next trend that would make them popular in the early 2000s. But at the very least, we can thank Jessie and James for helping to immortalize this bit of pop culture for the world to enjoy decades later. Let's not mince words, the beach beauty contest costumes were not convincing disguises, but they were never intended to be. Jessie's disguise was basically just Jessie in a bikini. Meowth's disguise was... oh, sorry Meowth, but there are no bipedal freakazoid Pokemon allowed in women's bikini contests. And then there was James, whose outlandish gender bend sent Puritan Western TV producer heads spinning and got the episode banned across the Western world. You know how it is. It's okay to chase someone down with an axe and the intent to murder them, but as soon as you pop out the good old human anatomy for comedic effect, it's a one-way ticket to the cartoon slammer. Thank you, James, for doing whatever you could to get that prize money, thereby eternalizing episode 18 as one of the most talked about Pokemon episodes of all time, despite the efforts of those pesky producers. James is a man with flair, we know that very well. But after learning from a Pokemon fortune-telling book given out by a local daycare that his Pokemon horoscope, of sorts, was none other than the bombastic Firebird Moltres, his unique flair burned brighter than ever. And he believed the book's words that Moltres types will soar above the others, starting to see himself as an invincible bad man and declaring himself the leader of Team Rocket. His sudden, out-of-character confidence boost was worth a Charmander chuckle, and after after storming the aforementioned daycare to steal every Pokemon in sight, only to be captured by Butch and Cassidy, who were apparently already running it as a sham daycare through which to steal Pokemon because they are marginally better at their jobs, James managed to break the trio out and later returned to the daycare op with a vengeance, with Jessie and Meowth driving a crane through the building's wall and a new hero emerging atop the crane, dressed as a red and orange bird, the flaming Moltres. Unfortunately, James's burning hot Moltres confidence fizzled out when he discovered that the fortune-telling book was merely a fake made by Butch and Cassidy, but the depression didn't stop him from bringing the costume back in the Dunsparce deception. James, you may not be a Moltres, but you certainly are the flame that burns brightest in the Pokemon universe. Team Rocket have dressed up as Ash and his friends multiple times, but the best protagonist impersonation costumes of all came about in XY's heroes, friends and foe alike, when they dressed up as the gang minus the Conan lookalike Clemont. And if you couldn't get a close look at their faces or a sense of their height, James and Jessie would be dead ringers for Ash and Serena. Meowth also captures the essence of Bonnie, I guess. And Inkay Pikachu looks like a Lovecraftian tentacle monster, and it's horrifying, but apparently a good enough costume to fool this silly kid. What catapults these impersonations into the top tier of disguises is the way Team Rocket used them to stir up trouble in town. Impersonating Ash, they went around beating on kids, stealing, and more in order to destroy Ash's reputation before he even rolled into town. It was funny, it was effective, and it ultimately landed Ash, Serena, and Bonnie at the local police station for questioning. Now, look into that thing's eyes for 10 seconds. I dare you. So, with all of these hilarious costumes on the list, what could possibly take the #1 spot? I thought about it carefully, but I have no choice but to tip my hat to none other than Jesselina, for what this disguise represents for Team Rocket. Their determination, the strength of their bonds, and their love for one another. Much like Jessabella and Jessadia of earlier series, Jesselina was a Team Rocket disguise of particular significance, as it was the alter ego that Jessie created to participate in Pokemon contests across Sinnoh. As such, the disguise has appeared far more often than any of the heist or mischief-making costumes, and it was actually used productively in Jessie's relatively successful contest run. However, as you might expect, it wasn't just Jessie who could turn into Jesselina, and when she came down with a nasty cold prior to the lily pad contest, James donned the Jesselina disguise to win the contest in her place with the assistance of Meowth and Carnivine. James showed his quality yet again. Meowth delivered when he needed to. Carnivine Carnivined. Jessie's heart was touched, and Jesselina would thereafter go on to win her way to the semi-finals of the Sinnoh Grand Festival. Jesselina is one of the few Rocket costumes that chalks up more than a one-off laugh. I found the Jamesalina episode truly heartwarming, and I do hope that we see more recurring costumes like this in the future. And there we have it, my top 10 Team Rocket disguises of all time. Like many people, I find that the gender role swapping, cross-dressing costumes tend to be the most memorable, and it's too bad we don't see many of them anymore. But how about you? Which Team Rocket disguise is your favorite, and are you a flaming Moltres? Thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and as always, let's chat.